I'm 38 years old. I work from home. 3 sons. A spine injury that turns sitting into a daily negotiation. 5 years of building something online from scratch, with no safety net. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you because the 12 things I'm about to share didn't come to me from a comfortable position. They came to me during the kind of years where you either find something solid to stand on or you sink. Stoic philosophy was that solid ground for me. Not as theory, not as motivation, as something I actually tested against real difficulty. Financial pressure, physical pain, the exhaustion of responsibility without rest, and found to be true. These 12 principles are not a list, they're more like a system. Each one connects to the others, and together they describe a way of being in the world that I found more useful than anything else I've encountered. Some of them you've heard before, but I want to go deeper than the surface versions, the motivational poster versions, because the surface versions are almost useless. The real ones are harder and considerably more valuable. Let's go. Everything in life falls into one of two categories: things you control, things you don't. This is the foundation of everything in Stoic philosophy. Everything else is built on it. If you don't get this one right, nothing else works. Epictetus, who was a slave, so the stakes of this idea were not abstract for him, put it this way: some things are in our control and others not. That sentence is so simple it almost sounds like nothing. But sit with what it actually implies. Your opinion, yours. Your effort, yours. Your response to what happens, yours. Your values, yours. The weather, not yours. What other people think of you, not yours. The economy, not yours. Traffic, not yours. Whether your video gets recommended, not yours. And here's the thing that took me the longest to actually feel rather than just understand. Most human suffering, not all, but most, comes from putting energy into the second category. Being angry about traffic, being anxious about other people's opinions, being resentful about economic conditions you didn't create and cannot individually change, being exhausted by news about events happening thousands of miles away that you have no ability to influence. Every one of those is energy taken from the first category, from what's actually yours. I have a whiteboard in my office. One sentence: only what you can change. I've looked at it every working day for 2 years. Not because I've mastered this, because the return to it is the practice. The circle of control isn't a rule you follow once. It's a question you ask constantly. Where is my energy going right now? Is it going towards something I can actually move? Or am I pouring it into something unmovable? That question, asked regularly, honestly, changes your life. Not dramatically, gradually, the way a river reshapes stone. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that Ryan Holiday later made famous. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. What this means practically is this: whatever is blocking you right now is not standing between you and your path. It is your path. The thing that went wrong, the limitation you're working around, the difficulty you didn't choose and would have avoided if you could. These are not accidents interrupting your progress. They are the conditions inside which your progress happens. I'll make this concrete. My spine injury forced me to change how I work. Fewer hours sitting, more deliberate use of time, less waste. Because I couldn't work for 12 hours straight, I had to get better at working for 4 hours that actually mattered. The injury was the obstacle, and the obstacle created the discipline I wouldn't have developed any other way. This is not gratitude for suffering. I'm not saying love your pain, embrace your limitation, everything happens for a reason. I'm saying something more specific. The obstacle in front of you right now contains information about what needs to develop in you, about what you've been avoiding, about where the real work is. The person who is blocked by an obstacle and asks, "Why is this happening to me?" is getting nothing from the experience. The person who is blocked and asks, "What does this require me to develop?" is getting an education. Same obstacle, completely different outcome. Most people are almost never where they are. Physically present, mentally elsewhere. At dinner, replaying the conversation from this morning. At work, worrying about what's happening at home. In a conversation, composing the next thing they want to say instead of actually listening to what's being said. This is not a character flaw. It's the default state of an unexamined mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Not the past, which you can't change. Not the future, which you can't fully predict or control. The present. Here. Now." And I want to be precise about why this matters practically. Because "be present" has become so common a phrase that it sounds like nothing. Here's what presence actually gives you. When you're present in a conversation, you actually hear what the other person is saying, not what you expect them to say, not what confirms what you already think, but what they're actually saying. This makes you better at relationships, at business, at understanding people, at making decisions based on reality rather than on your assumptions about reality. When you're present in your work, the quality is different. Not because you're trying harder, because you're actually there. Your full processing capacity is on the thing in front of you, not split between the thing and everything else. When you're present with your children, they feel it. They don't have language for the difference between a parent who is physically present and a parent who is actually there, but they feel it deeply. And the version of you that is actually there is the version that matters to them. The modern world is designed to prevent this. The phone in your pocket is engineered to interrupt. The notification exists specifically to pull you out of whatever you're in and into something else. The social media feed presents a continuous stream of elsewhere. Other people's lives, other places, other concerns that pull your attention away from the only place where your life is actually happening. I notice this in myself constantly. The pull toward elsewhere, even when I'm with people I love, even when I'm doing work that matters to me. The practice is noticing the pull and choosing again and again to return. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but more often than yesterday. Here's a thing that sounds paradoxical until you think it through. The person who has no self-discipline is not free. They are the least free person in any room, because they are governed entirely by impulse, by whatever the strongest feeling is at any given moment, by whatever requires the least resistance. Hungry, eat immediately, whatever is available. Uncomfortable, escape immediately through whatever is closest. Bored, stimulate immediately through whatever produces the fastest dopamine hit. Angry, react immediately with whatever comes out first. That person is not making choices. They are being driven by appetite, by impulse, by whatever external thing caught their attention most effectively. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Self-discipline, understood correctly, is not about restriction. It's about governance. It's the difference between a ship with a captain and a ship without one. Both ships are in the same ocean. Both face the same weather. One of them gets where it's going. The other goes wherever the current takes it. The discipline I'm describing is not the harsh, punishing, performance-based version that social media sells. The 5 a.m. wake-up, the cold shower post, the grind aesthetic. That version is often just a different form of impulse control problem. Chasing the dopamine hit of appearing disciplined rather than actually being disciplined. Real discipline is quieter. It's the decision at 11 p.m. to close the laptop instead of working for one more hour that will leave you depleted tomorrow. It's the decision to not send the message you'd regret. It's the decision to eat the thing that sustains you rather than the thing that distracts you from how tired you are. It's the decision to do the hard, unglamorous work that nobody will see or acknowledge because it's the right next thing. Nobody posts about that kind of discipline. It doesn't make content, it just makes a life. The Stoics are often misunderstood as teaching that emotions are bad, that the goal is to feel nothing, to become a kind of philosophical robot who processes events without any internal response. This is wrong, and it's worth being clear about, because the misunderstanding makes the philosophy seem either inhuman or useless. The Stoics were not trying to eliminate emotions, they were trying to understand them. Here's the actual teaching. Emotions are signals. They tell you something about your relationship to events. Fear tells you there's a perceived threat. Anger tells you that something violated your sense of what should be. Grief tells you that something important was lost. Anxiety tells you that the future feels uncontrollable. These signals have information in them. They're worth hearing. The problem is not the signal. The problem is mistaking the signal for a command. When anger arrives and you immediately act from it, say what it wants you to say, do what it pushes you toward, you are treating the signal as a command. You're not making a choice, you're being driven. When you notice the anger, name it, feel it fully, and then ask, what is the most useful response here? That's a different thing entirely. Same anger, completely different outcome. The practice is the gap, that tiny space between the feeling arriving and the response happening. The Stoics were obsessed with widening that gap, not to suppress the feeling, to create enough space to choose the response. In my own life, this has been the most practically useful of all the principles. Because I'm someone who feels things strongly. The anger comes fast. The anxiety is real. The discouragement on hard days is genuine. What changed was not the feelings disappearing. It was learning that I don't have to be the feeling. I can have the feeling and still choose how I respond. That distinction, having a feeling versus being driven by a feeling, is where all the real freedom lives. Remember that you will die. I know. We're watching a Roblox channel. This seems like an odd place for a meditation on mortality. Stay with me. Memento mori is the most misunderstood idea in all of Stoic philosophy. People hear, remember you will die, and think, this is dark, this is morbid, this is the kind of thing that monks contemplated while staring at skulls. But that's not what it is. Death is the subject. Life is the point. Here's the actual practice. You have a finite number of days, not an estimated number, a specific, actual number that is decreasing as you read this. You don't know it. I don't know mine. But it exists. Now hold that clearly for a moment, not as an abstraction, but as a felt reality. If you actually felt the finiteness of your time, not just knew it intellectually, but felt it, what would change? Would you spend this evening watching things you don't actually care about because your hand reached for the remote by habit? Would you sustain the resentment you've been carrying for 2 years? Would you continue avoiding the conversation you've been putting off? Would you spend another year in work that drains you without meaning, waiting for some day to start the thing that actually matters? Probably not. The reason we live as if we have unlimited time is simple. Thinking about death is uncomfortable, so we avoid it. We fill the space with noise, with plans that extend infinitely forward, with a comfortable assumption that there's always more time for the important things. And life passes. Not dramatically, in hours spent on nothing, in years where you were technically alive but not quite present. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being morbid, he was being precise. The things that feel urgent, the notifications, the status anxiety, the small daily grievances, they all look different when held against the fact that the time is running. And the things that feel too big to attempt, too risky to start, too vulnerable to say, those look different too. The practice of memento mori doesn't produce fear, it produces clarity. And clarity, when you're living an actual human life, is the rarest and most valuable thing available. The modern world has a complicated relationship with gratitude. On one hand, it's everywhere. Gratitude journals, gratitude practices, gratitude as the answer to every problem. Toxic positivity dressed in the language of thankfulness. On the other hand, the system, social media, advertising, the entire attention economy, is built on producing and maintaining a sense of lack. The feeling that what you have is not quite enough, that you need something more, something better, something different. Gratitude, practiced genuinely, is an act of resistance against this. Not because it pretends things are fine when they aren't, not because it denies difficulty or pain or genuine lack, but because it insists on seeing what is actually there alongside what is missing. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and dealt with plagues and wars and political betrayal, wrote daily about small things. The fact of being alive, the ability to think, the people around him, the morning light. Not because his life was easy, because he understood that the capacity to notice what is good alongside what is hard is a skill. And like all skills, it atrophies if you don't practice it, and strengthens if you do. I've tried this practice, not consistently, not perfectly, but enough to notice a real difference. On the days when I deliberately notice what's actually working, the fact that I'm building something real, that my boys are healthy, that I'm doing work that means something to me, the same circumstances that can feel like pressure also feel like possibility. Nothing external changes. The financial stress is the same, the spine is the same, the workload is the same. But something in the internal relationship to all of it shifts. Gratitude is not a feeling, it's a practice. And the practice changes what you see. The Stoics had a word, arete, usually translated as virtue or excellence. But it means something more specific and more useful than either of those translations suggests. It means becoming fully what you are capable of being. Not perfect, not flawless, fully developed. Living at the level of your actual potential rather than the level of your comfort. And the Stoic teaching on this is precise. Excellence is the only real good. Money is not a real good. It's useful, but it doesn't make you good or bad. Health is not a real good. It's valuable, but plenty of healthy people live poorly. Success is not a real good. It can be built on excellence or on manipulation. The only thing that is genuinely, lastingly good is who you are, your character, the quality of your daily choices, the gap between the person you present and the person you actually are when no one is watching. This might sound abstract. Let me make it practical. Personal excellence means doing your actual best on the thing in front of you right now. Not performing your best, doing it. It means not saying you value honesty and then being dishonest when honesty is inconvenient. It means not saying you value presence and then being absent from your children because the phone is more stimulating. It means not saying you want to build something real and then spending the hour you allocated to building it consuming content about other people building things. The gap between what we say we value and how we actually live, that gap is where excellence lives. Closing it, slowly, imperfectly, repeatedly, that's the practice. And the measure is not other people's assessment of you. The measure is whether you can look honestly at today and say, I live closer to my actual values today than I did yesterday. That's it. That's the whole standard. Epictetus. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. He was joking, but the point underneath the joke is serious. What other people think of you is not in your control. It never was. It never will be. And the modern world has created a situation where you receive, in real time, at enormous volume, information about what people think of you, or at least what they're willing to say publicly, which is a very specific and frequently distorted subset of what they actually think. The like counts, the comment sections, the analytics, the comparison between your numbers and someone else's. All of this produces a specific kind of anxiety that has no historical precedent. Previous generations didn't have access to real-time metrics on how many people approved of them. This is genuinely new. And the Stoic answer to it is genuinely old. Their opinion of you is their business, not yours. This doesn't mean feedback is useless. It doesn't mean you should be indifferent to how your work lands or what impact your actions have on other people. But there's a difference between paying attention to whether your work is actually good, which requires honest assessment, and paying attention to whether people like you, which is outside your control and often tells you more about them than about you. The person who builds their internal stability on others' approval is fragile, because others' approval is unstable. It changes. It fluctuates. It depends on factors entirely outside your control. The person who builds their internal stability on their own assessment of their character. Am I being honest? Am I trying hard? Am I living consistently with what I actually value? That person has something that doesn't shift every time the metrics do. Independence from others' opinions is not arrogance. It's not caring what happens to people around you. It's the quiet decision to not let other people's noise be the basis on which you evaluate yourself. Everything changes. Everything. This is so obvious that it sounds like nothing. And yet, most of the suffering I've observed in myself and in the people around me comes from fighting this obvious fact, resisting the change that has already happened, refusing to accept that the situation is different than it was, clinging to the version of things that no longer exists. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." The relationship ended. That's a change that happened. Resisting it, arguing internally with the fact that it happened, doesn't restore it. It just costs you the energy and attention that could go to what comes next. The plan fell apart. That's a change that happened. Being furious about it doesn't rebuild the plan. It delays the process of adapting to the new situation. The change is usually not the problem. The resistance to the change is the problem. Now, I want to be careful here because this principle gets misused. Embracing change is not a reason to accept injustice. It's not a reason to stop trying to improve your situation. It's not a philosophy of passivity that says, whatever happens, just accept it. That's not what it means. It means, don't spend energy fighting the reality of what has already happened. That fight is unwinnable. The event is done. Accept the fact of it. Then decide what to do about it. That sequence, accept, then act, is completely different from the sequence that most people actually run. Resist, stay stuck in resistance, eventually accept, then act. The Stoic version is shorter and significantly less painful. The Stoics were not individualists. This surprises people. Stoicism has a reputation, especially in certain modern circles, of being about radical self-reliance. The lone man who needs nothing and no one. That's not what the Stoics taught. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly. What injures the hive injures the bee. We are not separate units optimizing in isolation. We are parts of something larger, and our well-being is genuinely connected to the well-being of the people around us, in ways that can't be reduced to personal development. Seneca, no man lives for himself alone. The practical version of this is simple. The quality of your close relationships, the people you spend real time with, who know you honestly, who you can be fully yourself with. This matters enormously to your inner state. Not your follower count, not your professional network, not your social media connections, the real ones. And compassion, which the modern world often mistakes for weakness, is actually a form of accurate perception. When you see another person clearly, you see someone who is struggling with the same basic human things you are, who wants things and is afraid of things and sometimes acts badly because of their fear, who is trying to navigate a difficult existence with imperfect tools. You recognize this because it describes you too. From that recognition, genuine compassion arises. Not pity, not superiority, just the recognition that we're all in the same basic situation. And from that recognition, the impulse to help, when you have something to offer, feels natural rather than obligatory. This is the Stoic community, not a social obligation, an acknowledgement of what we actually are, connected, interdependent, better together than separate. The last principle is the one that holds all the others together. Marcus Aurelius, at the end of each day, sat and wrote, not for publication, not for posterity, for himself. What did I do today that was consistent with my values? Where did I fall short? What would I do differently? That practice, the meditations, is what we still read 2,000 years later. Not because he was a great emperor, because he was a man who kept honest account with himself every single day. And the practice works, not because it changes the past, because it changes what happens next. When you examine your day honestly, when you don't just let it pass in a blur of events, you see patterns. You see where you keep making the same mistakes, where you keep avoiding the same things, where the same situations keep producing the same unwanted responses. And you can't change a pattern you haven't seen. The self-reflection practice is simple. 3 questions every day. What did I do today that I'm actually proud of? Where did I fall short of my own standards? What do I want to do differently tomorrow? Not as self-punishment, not as a way to generate guilt or shame, just as an honest accounting. The person who runs this practice consistently becomes, slowly, the kind of person they actually want to be. Not because they're harder on themselves, because they're more honest with themselves. And honesty with yourself, about yourself, is the foundation on which all 12 of these principles rest. I said at the beginning, I'm 38, I work from home, 3 sons, a spine that argues with me, several years of building something real from nothing. These 12 principles didn't make any of that easy. What they did was give me something to stand on while it was hard, a framework for knowing where to direct my energy and where to stop fighting the unmovable, a way of understanding my emotions without being controlled by them, a reminder that the time is finite and therefore what I do with it matters, a practice of honest daily accounting that keeps me from drifting too far from what I actually value. None of this is magic. None of it resolves the real difficulties of a real life. But tested against actual difficulty, and I've tested it against actual difficulty, it holds. That's the only endorsement I have to offer. Not a theory, a life, imperfectly lived, with these ideas as a compass. If any of these principles landed, if one of them connected to something you're actually experiencing right now, leave a comment. Tell me which one. Tell me where you are. I read everything. See you in the next one.